Hello, and welcome back to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss their relevance and impact today. I'm Brett Duval, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, a man who has taken a journey with me that has begun with 100 steps.
Tim Longo.
It's episode 100, sir.
Oh my goodness. I didn't even notice that.
We've ticked over into another digit. So,
oh man,
how fitting!
How appropriate!
Yeah, how fitting that we should be finishing Metal Gear on episode 100.
Yes, that's perfect. I love it. Well, congratulations to you, sir.
Thank you very much.
I'm sorry I didn't notice that right off the bat and have not been keeping good count, but what a nice surprise!
Yeah, I thought I'd hold that in reserve. I had lots of quotes from the game that I was going to work in, but.
So many possibilities for this one.
There really are. Mr. President.
Oh, yeah. You're talking about the very end?
So much good stuff. Anyway, I know that so we're finishing up Metal Gear this week. We're Metal Gear Solid. We're going to try to kind of breeze through this pretty quickly, mostly because Tim is exhausted from a weekend of packing boxes and moving them, or whatever, watching people. I don't know. I assume you hired somebody to actually move your boxes?
Yeah, it was a combo. Like we definitely, we should have had them move more stuff, but kind of overextended ourselves. But yeah, I'm pooped, but yeah, no, we're good. Yeah. I want to make sure we see Metal Gear out in style. So yeah, let's get into it. We can take the time we need. It's quite an ending of, I mean, maybe any game.
Yeah. Well, all of these games are this way, where the ending is
that's true.
Extravagant. So let's put it. I mean, here actually more so than in other games that I've played in the series. At least the ending is mostly interactive. I mean, there are scenes that are, and especially kind of at the very end of the game, there are several scenes that are video and audio and things like that. But for the most part, there are action sequences throughout, and not 20 minutes of cutscenes, for example, in between.
Yeah, that's fair. Mm-hmm.
So,
well, as we talked about last time, I think what ends up happening that they did have more than you really would want typically, with the codec sequences, they basically in the future games, they turn those into cutscenes. And so there's some chunky codec sections that, would be replaced with cinematics. But yeah, you're right. I mean, then maybe there wasn't as much, of that ego getting through that yet, of how frustrated filmmaker kind of thing.
Yeah, no, fair enough.
So,
I mean, I think that you're right in that the codecs definitely are more like little cutscenes as well. But since I'm also reading them, I don't know, it just sort of changes the tenor of those in a way.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, yeah, and some of the charm of the game and the series is in those codecs and the way that they handle those. So it's something they continue forward, and is a bit of a. I mean, I don't know. Well, we never really talked about inspiration for the codexes. I'm trying to think of where he could have kind of been inspired by that for, but definitely it has influenced a lot of other games when it comes to how you can economically have those sort of interactions happen, like in a codec style thing. But
right, I mean,
can't think of
really. I mean, it's very similar to just audio diaries and things like that, things that we would see in System Shock 2 going to the very beginning of this podcast, but any number of games, obviously they've become very tropey and kind of fallen out of style a little bit now, mainly because they've been such a crutch for storytelling in the last decade or so, maybe even longer, 15 years or so. So we've been seeing, I think, a little bit of a trend away from that in the past year or two. But in general, that's been a real storytelling part of the medium. And those sometimes even feel conversational in the sense that you might have two characters in one. It's not you, but you have a couple characters having a bit of a story or what have you. Or over the course of multiple audio diaries, you'll get characters who are talking about the same events and things like that. So you have a lot of the same touches, but it's not the immediacy of like the wish fulfillment of being your character.
Yeah. I just think like we've talked about it on various, because the era of games that we've been typically playing has been kind of during the rise of VO in general, you know, and the role that voice actors play and the importance that they play over time. And codecs is, you know, a good example, like you said. Audio logs, a good example, where I think developers are just got overly, you know, just clever over time about how to utilize VO in interesting ways. And this is a really like shining example of that, for sure. And I don't know if I referenced it off air last time or not, but in Metal Gear Solid V or 5, they go even further with some of this sort of recordings,
right?
Cassette tape recordings.
Yeah, you did mention that, I think, on air last week. Yeah.
And it's just like, I mean, hours and hours and hours. Like I never looked up the number, but it's it is an impressive amount of VO work for probably I would guess a fairly small amount of the audience who actually listened to all of them. I tried, and I'm a hardcore fan, and I didn't even get through all of them. I mean, there is a lot. And so kind of, yeah, so you kind of question sometimes how far he goes with some of that stuff, but there's just some charm in there too. But yeah, it's something that he pioneered, and we can maybe get back to it when we come to takeaways. But and we talked a little bit about just voice acting in general in this game being so stellar and really putting kind of a voice to the faces of these crazy characters.
Right.
It's always a memorable thing for me, at least with this series and this game in particular, because I think it blew us all away at the time. Right? It's like the commitment to the characters was really, really impressive.
Yeah, so let's kind of go through, I guess, some of the remaining characters that we're going to run into. Of course, last time we left off with me having had to take a break. And take it a little easy. I'm getting there. I'm improving.
Rehabilitating.
Yeah, slowly. I got a new keyboard, which people who follow me on Twitter will have seen. It's one of those split. It's one piece, but it's divided, and then the keys are concave, so they're in lower, according to finger lengths. It's a little strange after 30 plus years of typing with a standard keyboard to switch, but I'm accommodating. But I appreciate everybody's patience with me. So yeah, the next thing up for me then was this Vulcan Raven battle.
Yeah. What do you think of that?
I like that battle a lot. I remembered it. I liked how you can sort of lead him around by making noises in specific spots, and he'll basically path to there. So you can sort of trap him and then use the Nikita, the guided missiles, to basically come up behind him. Otherwise, he will shoot them if he sees them. So you have to sort of play cat and mouse with him a little bit, which is kind of neat. There was a point at which I realized that was a little unnecessary, and I just started putting down what are the bombs you put on the ground?
C4.
No, the ones that go off on their own. You need the mine detector to find.
No, I didn't actually use those. I forgot you could pick. You're saying you pick those up when you use a mine detector?
Right, you pick them up when you cross the minefield. Did you just avoid them all the time? Yeah,
I just run.
Okay. Yeah, you can pick those up, and I had like 20 of them.
I totally forgot about that. Yeah. I just use C4 mainly, and some Nikita, but I just use C4 in the Vulcan Raven and just put it on the ground and then detonated it when he ran by.
Okay, yeah. So that's what I ended up doing. Is
that's cool.
You can also do that, but it was easier to just hide in and go, okay,
have him
figure out which way he's going to come, and then go pick up the other one as I went. So
well, that's cool that 3 different ways, even just the way that we talked about it. There probably are other ways to get them too, but
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, I think you could probably just shoot him probably on the easiest. Claymore is what they're called. On the easiest level of difficulty, I think you could just shoot him. I think it's probably fairly straightforward. Especially at that point you have a lot of health and things like that, or rations. So I don't think it would be a difficult thing to do anyway. You could probably throw grenades. I think there's probably lots of options. But it feels like the way it's meant to be played is this sort of cat and mouse, and pull him to you and plan for it. And at some points you might find yourself having to kind of scurry away because he came away you weren't expecting, or he started moving faster, which sort of happens. That's the point at which I switched to claymores. So, but yeah, I like that battle. It's one of my favorites, actually, because it feels, it has that sense of an AI that you can plan for and utilize how it works to your advantage, more so than I think any other of the battles here. A lot of them feel a little bit more random sure, I mean, Sniper Wolf's going from position to position, but which one she stops at is apparently random, and you can't really control it, or something like that. Obviously, Mantis he has patterns. You memorize the patterns, but here it's literally like, I set the bait, you come for the bait, and I trap you.
Yeah, it's a little more emergent. Yeah, and you can. Yeah, and the other thing that I like about this battle in particular, which I'm trying to think back, I guess maybe the Ocelot battle is the only other one. I guess Mantis a little bit too, but I feel like the level design and the boss design work well with the camera design, because it's this top-down camera, and the room is very grid-based and top-down as well. And so you can't really always see him on screen, but you do get a good sense with the radar about where he is and stuff. And I feel like everything meshes better. But like, for instance, the Sniper Wolf, like you can use the Nikita, but if you're sniping or using the Nikita, you're not in the typical camera, layout there. And so, anytime you have to shift things up, you kind of mentally, your brain has to like think differently about how to deal with it.
Right. No, that's a good point. I think that's really accurate in that you can pretty easily judge where he must be, even if he's off screen, based on his radar coverage of the area that you can see. And so it does really, all those things work together very well. The grid nature, which also makes it a navigation challenge, because you can't see where the blockages are. Maybe you can. I guess you can, but when you start moving, you might not be able to see it enough in advance to plan your path correctly.
There's a little tension.
So it's really good. I had kind of forgotten they were there. In fact, the first time I did the battle, it was a funny thing. I beat him the first time through. I had no trouble. He didn't kill me or anything like that. And then I went through the next area, and then there was a cutscene. And I was trying to pause it. I couldn't remember if you could pause an in-engine cutscene. Spoilers, you can't. And so it skipped to the end. And it was that shot where you walk into the room with Rex or with Metal Gear or whatever.
Yeah.
And so what happened was I step into there. It starts panning up basically, and I hit the button to pause just to take a break or whatever, and it skipped to the end. I was like, oh man. So I went back and redid the battle, and then I had to do it like 3 times because I couldn't do it right. And then I went and got back to that cutscene, and I had basically seen everything. There's like less than a second left of the cutscene that I hadn't seen. It's really short, so I was really annoyed.
That is hilarious. Yeah, but you're so paranoid because cutscenes are so prevalent in this game that
exactly. I didn't want to miss out anything that was super important.
And plus it was the introduction of Rex, so. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's a good intro, which I guess is the next thing, right? Is that we're basically then at the very close to the end of the game, but there's a lot of really good stuff that happens there. And actually, I didn't mind the backtracking as much as I expected to.
Oh, interesting. I was anticipating hearing about that, but I mean, I don't know. Yeah, interesting. Okay, it didn't feel just sort of forced and unfair as far as or did I warn you too much about it and you were kind of prepared?
You only kind of mentioned in passing that there's some backtracking coming up for you, and I was like, yeah, I think that's right. That at the end of the game, there's a bit of backtracking, but it wasn't really that far. I mean, going back to the boiler room was the furthest, obviously.
It was, for me, it was about the succession of like just so many backtracking. It felt like it was, stretching time. So many in a row, right? Because first it's the original key that gets knocked from your hand, right? So then you gotta, and it's so cumbersome to
go find it,
get around Rex and get over him, and and climb down the ladders, which is like the slowest navigation you have in the game, and you got to go up and down, you get that, and then the PAL thing I totally forgot about. I don't know how, because it's so memorable in its ridiculousness. And then I guess using this, it makes some interesting design sense, but making this one key do multiple things, really the only reason that, they could have just as easily made 3 keys, and then maybe
found them on the way or whatever,
or even have, you still could do the whole temperature thing with them, but like make each, like, why is this one? I don't know. It just seems over designed.
Because it's cool. It's cool. It's like this alloy.
Yeah. Well, so I agree with you.
It's a little techie, I guess. I think is just the thing.
I love that part of it, but I think that's always, it's a tension that even I feel day to day, like in my day job. It's like there's clever, cool, sci-fi things to do, but if it's at the expense of the player, I think you just have to be careful. It's like,
right,
don't let the coolness overshadow usability or fun, and it's a constant conundrum. I mean, I it's not like it's easy, and I've solved it ever, but anyway, it's just something that it stood out to me. That's all.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I will say I do like the whole setup, because I wrote down in my notes, and I had forgotten this about it, that Snake gets up to the top. He's outside the room where Revolver and Liquid are having a conversation about what needs to happen. Mm-hmm. And Revolver actually looks down at the monitor and sees that Snake is outside the door.
Yeah. Yeah.
And at that point, I'm thinking, Revolver is actually working against Liquid. Like, he's trying to codedly tell him, and instead it's actually a double whammy. It's on the player. The player is led to believe, Revolver knows he's there, therefore he's trying to give him information. Instead, he's feeding him a lie.
Yeah,
which is just great. That's a great whole loop that happens.
It's some subtle stuff for a video game at this time, of any video game really, of like kind of that kind of interchange.
Yeah. I mean, it's very subtle. I certainly didn't remember it from last time. And then he shoots the thing out of his hand, which is like, I don't know what. I guess that sort of reinforces the underlying thing, which is that he doesn't want him to have this thing or whatever. But I guess that reinforces Snake's expectations, right? And makes him believe the lie, is really what I mean. And like you said, then you have to go find it in the sewer water, which you're taking damage from and things like that. Yeah, that part's not great. I didn't mind the elevators at all. And you don't really have to go that far back for the ice key.
Yeah.
You just have to go back to Raven.
But it's like you have to deal with the turrets multiple times, and talk about economical use of levels, and stretching the most out of it. But I guess it's just the sort of usability of it that I feel like, we just wouldn't get away with that.
I think it's meant to be a puzzle, and it just kind of goes a little too far, maybe.
Yeah. That's fair. But the keys were cool. The sequence was cool, and like, the little server things kind of lower into the ground, into the table and the desk, and so there's
that's
a lot
very James Bond.
Yeah, a lot of cool in the VO. I feel, wasn't there VO or where there was a
yes, yeah, it's announcing what's going on as it does.
Yeah,
it's sort of like the other thing that reminds me of is I think one of the Star Trek movies does something similar where they to self-destruct the ship, they have to.
Well, I'm sure, yeah.
Do something similar. I really don't remember
three rods. Yeah,
that sort of thing.
That was when Spock died. Actually, yeah, that could have been when he was in the thing. Anyway, yeah,
that reminded me of that as well. But yeah, it's that whole sequence is pretty good. Except, you do have to cover a little more ground than probably I'd like. It is funny though. You basically can just go and hang out in the room where the the cold room or the hot room or whatever. I just went into the little steam tunnel area where the guards don't go.
Yeah,
in the boiler room, and just stood there and just occasionally looked at it like, nope, not yet. Kind of funny.
Yeah,
I was kind of surprised that there wasn't an inventory way to do it. A way to, I don't know, blow up some C4 next to yourself and have it heat up as a result.
Oh yeah, interesting. Yeah, some clever combination. Possible. Yeah, they don't do many.
But you've had the thing the whole time, right?
For a while. Yeah, I think Meryl gives it to you right when you.
Oh right. Meryl
around
gives
the mantis section. Yeah. But it is.
Yeah, so in theory, it should have changed shape while I was fighting Raven, since the rations would freeze up while I would do that.
Isn't there an order implication when you are using it in the computer? Isn't it like you have to use the first one and then it enables you to cool? Or maybe it's...
No, I don't think it says that. I think it's literally like you have to do it in this order.
Okay,
you know,
could have,
he's explaining that, but I don't think that there's anything that prevents...
Yeah.
I mean, the game may prevent it. I certainly didn't test. I wasn't going to do extra work this time.
Maybe it does, and you just didn't look. Maybe the key card does change to blue. You know?
That's possible.
Somebody's going to write in. Tell us.
Yeah. I'm willing to entertain the possibility because I certainly noticed that the rations froze up, and because in one of those battles I had to run around for a while and heat up the rations again, which is really funny.
I mean that's if it does, I wouldn't be surprised, and it would be pretty cool if they did have it actually be reactive the whole time, and you could notice it. Which would be, if you noticed it out of order, though, we kind of get back to the Ron Gilbert problem of like, why is this turning red? You have no context for why, right? Because it kind of gives away, it might give away the concept that there is only one key. Anyway, we're rat holing here, but but then we get to Rex, right? I mean, basically, well, so before that, I wanted to mention, we got to talk about the Master Miller,
right, the whole thing with Naomi's story, and then finally revealing what's going on with the Master and how the calls are coming from inside the house.
Master Miller's kind of trying to throw Naomi under the bus, and then turns out he's Liquid in disguise.
But he's also thrown her under the bus, because that's still true.
Yeah,
that she's not who she says she is, which is the double weird thing.
It gets so complicated and convoluted in that whole sort of subplot stuff, right? With her and him. The interesting, cool thing, which you probably know, and it's not really a spoiler, but they talk about Miller. And I think Campbell, doesn't he say at one point that they found Miller dead in his house or something?
Right. They find that, right before he's revealed. Yeah.
Right. And Miller is in, I don't know if he's in 3, but I think he's in Peace Walker and in 5, because he, canonically, right, he's alive at that point.
Right.
But it's just that connection. And actually, I need to take one quick side topic here. I want to retract something I said last episode, because I actually did some soul searching and some thinking and some rereading and refreshing my memory on some of the particulars of the ending of 5, which I won't reveal. But what I did say last time was I'm bummed that he won't get a chance to sort of make that final game, that kind of like we're missing the game where you kind of get to see Big Boss as old. Yeah. And the more I thought about it and remembered the specifics, and then, like I said, reread, I think he actually did fully connect the dots. because it basically goes all the way back. It comes full circle to the Metal Gear on the NES, the original, the way that 5 kind of. So again, I'm not going to spoil anything specific because it's a pretty big thing. You'll never think of it, I think, of what actually happens. But he did think it through. He retconned the hell out of his whole series by doing it. But he found a way, and I'll be vague, he found a way to justify how something happens in the NES and the sequel, how something happens in those games by what happens in 5. And so I don't think there is a game that needs to be made there. So anyway, I just wanted to retract my comment.
You wanted to pull that back.
I wanted that to be on the record that I was wrong when I said that before. And I think
I had my own sort of topic that came out of this, which was I sort of feel like this, in a way, this universe suffers a little bit from the and it kind of was revealed in this section of the same problem that some people say about Star Wars, especially when they were looking towards these new films that have been coming out, with the small world problem.
Did I ever tell you about the Chewbacca effect? I don't know if we used it after. I feel like maybe after you left. I don't remember if we talked about that time. We must have been. But yeah, just you called it the Chewbacca effect because in episode 3, it turns out Chewbacca knew Yoda, and Yoda was literally riding on his shoulders during the Battle of Kashyyyk. And, it's just ridiculous that the two of them know each other. But the small universe problem.
Right. Yeah, exactly. The idea that this one family and a small surrounding cast of characters are involved in literally every big event that ever happens. It really reveals itself when Naomi turns out to be Gray Fox's sort of sister. Not really, but the Gray Fox killed her parents, and of course then he's the guy that Snake killed in Zanzibar, I guess. And I mean, it just
soap opera, melodrama, like it's all
it's just it's an issue.
It is, but
I mean, it's nice because it's economical, right? And I actually don't so much mind it in this particular story. It's a little much. That's the point at which it's really strains, where I'm like, oh, okay, he's this guy is now that, and like, but it does lead to some nice touches. So I'm not really on that. I'm not upset, but it is sort of like, oh, okay, well, all these characters are like all the characters, like they're the only ones who matter in the world, with the possible exception of the president, who we also hear from later. So, it's something that I, for some weird reason, like about the series, because I don't take it so seriously. I think it's hilarious that, that Ocelot, his as one example of your point, throughout history has played these various roles, but it's always kind of him, let alone, where does Liquid Ocelot fit in? Is he in 2? Oh man, I'm outing myself on air. Liquid Ocelot, do you know who that is? Because you haven't played. I'm sorry, say that again.
Liquid Ocelot. Is he?
Yeah, you got me.
Okay, so that's 4.
I think that's in 2.
Maybe that's 2. Yeah, I forget where.
I think that's in 2. You mean when his arm is like connected?
Yeah. Which is to your point is like the perfect example, right? You have Liquid's arm on Ocelot's body, and it's like 2 characters have been canonically,
fused in some way.
Literally,
it's no sense whatsoever.
To create this kind of small universe effect you're talking about, which is just amazing. But it's just so it's just such a soap opera. Like, I don't know, I love it. In Star Wars, I feel like it takes itself so seriously. Well, I mean, I guess he is too. I just don't take him seriously in this case. But anyway, yeah, it's a funny thing. But yeah, Naomi and that connection, and then of course Liquid, the whole Liquid Big Boss, Solid Snake and all that stuff. That whole story is evergreen throughout the series as well.
Right.
Yeah. But I mean, so then not far after that, you basically, Liquid takes his shirt off and it's on.
Yeah. Right.
Or he takes his coat off.
Well, first you fight him in Rex.
Yeah, that's what I mean. But before he gets into Rex, he has a shirt off.
Oh, right, right.
Like
yeah. He's like,
it's a symbol. Right. I've always thought that was a funny.
He does. He literally says it's on, doesn't he?
Symbolic moment, and he stands there doing his monologuing right outside of Rex with his coat off, his shirt off, and then he's like, okay, and he gets in. Yeah. But Rex. So what did you think of the Rex battle? I mean, I've always thought it was a pretty fun.
So what I was really hating it. And the reason I was really hating it is because I wasn't playing it right. And what I really appreciate about it is that it forces you to be bold. The only way really to defeat it, you can't run away and hide behind things anymore. You've got to stand basically right underneath it, dodge the gunfire and the laser cutter thing or whatever, because that's the only place the missiles can't reach.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to get in close and right. I mean, the whole series, and especially after this one, not so much in this one, but in the other games in the series, there's a lot of that close quarters combat, and it's particularly funny that you're doing it with this thing that is about 20 times your size.
Yeah. It's very, it's kind of very anime or something, in that sense, and
right,
yeah, and in larger than life, it's like you are. I guess it kind of goes back to James Bond to some degree, right? You're that lone agent who can stand against anything. And definitely
right. You're
that.
RoboCop versus the big, I forget what that thing was called, but it actually looks kind of similar to Rex.
Yeah.
That first unit.
Yeah, I'm forgetting the name of it. Yeah. It's kind of similar to that. That was a little bit before this game as well, and that's a very Gray Fox thing as well. So maybe some RoboCop coming in there as well. Yeah,
the Gray Fox design, especially when he gets beat up and you can see his face a little bit, right? You can see
his mask kind of opens, so you can see him.
Right.
Yeah, kind of like retracts open, which is a little Raiden-esque later on too, but yeah.
Well, it's also like when RoboCop gets his helmet gets a bullet hole in it or something. You can see his eye, and when you can't see his face most of the time when he's helmeted. Yeah. So it reminded me of that as well. But yeah, no, I did really enjoy the battle, although I found it frustrating till I realized that's what you had to do.
Yeah, it's pretty punishing if you're trying to kind of like play like other bosses, I guess. Yeah, you're right. And there are ways to have him, like, you can hide under there, but also he can lose track of you. You know what I mean? And go. So you probably had that happen as well, right? When you kind of hide from him, and then you can kind of readjust. So there's you can play with some of the stealth mechanics, but it's like just in a different way. You know what I mean? Like kind of out in the open in a way, because he can't turn as fast and he's too big and that kind of stuff. But
yeah, I definitely saw that happen, although mostly not in battles in which I was successful, because I would try to get out and pop off a shot, and then he'd know where I was, and now I was too far away, and getting to him and stuff was very difficult. But once I figured out what to do there, it was very fulfilling to be able to do it. You felt totally like you were kicking butt. So I did really appreciate that. Let's see. What's the second part? I guess in the second part, you have to basically shoot him in the mouth. Right?
Yes, directly in
where Liquid is. Yeah.
I mean, basically, Liquid is the
first. You're shooting the radar or whatever that allows him to shoot the missiles at you, and then you need to shoot Liquid, but it's timing based or something. Right?
Yeah, and Liquid's the boss that never dies. Basically, that was always my funny takeaway from this whole section. Like, he just will not. Well, not only that, you've already fought him in a helicopter.
That's true. He's the Halloween. He's what's his name? Michael Myers in Halloween at this point. He just keeps coming back and keeps coming back.
I mean, he was in,
but that makes sense because he's the superior clone, even though he doesn't think he is.
Right. He was in the Hind, right? And so it's like multiple returns, which makes him very memorable, right? As far as villains go. But then before the second phase, we have the whole Gray Fox. Just deep dive on that whole thing.
deep dive on the whole 9 yards.
So
I was there and this happened. I had to, and
confessions.
It's good actually, and a confession, but also it sets up a nice little moment later where he has the opportunity to tell Naomi what he said, and he said, he says something more fitting, like he loved you and whatever, right. And he doesn't confess. He basically carries that for Gray Fox, which I really like that as well. In the it's just a nice narrative element to set up a thing like that. I mean, that's a trope. We've seen it before. It's not new. It's probably not been seen too much in games, to be honest. So it's kind of refreshing in that way, even though I'm sure I've seen that in movies and read it in books and things like that. It's not a new idea. But it may be the only time I've seen it in a video game. So I like that. I like that very much. I always appreciate narrative touches like those.
But then, just the deep lore there, super impressive for me at least. And then, like I said, I had reread the descriptions in the menu of the first two games and how Gray Fox, before I got to this section, how Gray Fox fit into all that, and a lot of what he was saying in that scene, was really directly connected to that, which is so funny because I guess you didn't need to know that stuff to enjoy the scene, but probably nobody who played Metal Gear Solid played, Metal Gear 2, or very few people. So
right, comparatively,
even though
I'm sure it was a very
to his credit, he tried to make it all fit together, which was nice. But then we get to the fist fight, basically, right? Is that the next thing? Where
the next thing is the hand-to-hand fight on top of Rex, where you discover, in my case, you discover that Meryl's alive. What happens in your case?
So she is there. Her body is there, laying probably in the same place, but it's uncertain whether she's alive or not. And actually, his Liquid references her, and I think he says something like, she may be alive. You know what I mean? Like, you don't know, Snake. Is she alive? But you got to beat me to find out, or something like that. That was my impression. I forget. Maybe she died during the fight or something. But yeah, so you fight him, and then
I mean, he definitely is. He definitely, in my version, I think it's pretty clear she's alive, and you're fighting basically to save her life. You have to defeat him within 3 minutes or something like that in order.
But I don't remember her like moving around or anything like that.
Right. No, that's fair. It might be left undecided at that point. Of course, I knew she was still alive, so I may have telegraphed a little bit. Actually, there's one big kind of story thing we didn't talk about at all, which was another thing I quite enjoyed, which was when Liquid's monologuing.
Yeah, that's true. Sorry.
He reveals the whole thing about the FoxDie virus and how it turns out that, and this is a great reveal, that Solid is actually the vector for the thing, that it's him coming into contact with Decoy Octopus. Yeah, and
that was a great reveal.
It's a great moment of like, oh, it's because you're coming in touch with these people that they're dying. It wouldn't happen on their own. They sent you in, and then you actually get in touch with Campbell, and Campbell's like, yeah, it's true. Sorry, Snake. What a jerk.
Yeah, that was clever. Yeah, that was a good little kind of reversal reveal thing. And then, of course, FoxDie is a thing throughout later in the series too, for Snake. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I know it's a huge deal in 4 because it's why he's aging and all that stuff.
You have to finish 4 someday. There's some crazy stuff at the end of that game.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to playing some more of it. Hopefully, I'll heal up in the next couple of weeks, and I'll be able to get to it while we're playing our next game, which is going to be a PC game. A little teaser for later. But yeah, it was. There are just a lot of, even though there's a lot of histrionics and like all the Gray Fox stuff seemed a little bit too drawn out to me. nonetheless, and the monologuing too, it all ties together with these really great moments and sets up other great moments that you kind of forgive it for taking up a little bit too much breathing room, because it just, I don't know, it just feels like high drama, and it's okay that it's a little extended. He does maybe take that a little too far in later entries in the series, but here since it's new and fresh as well, I think it's okay. And I think it does borrow from, I don't know, maybe some Japanese theatrical traditions as well.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm feeling my way around on that a little bit.
A lot of what Liquid was talking about was focused around gene technology and science and kind of, right. I mean, I feel like around this time, maybe the sort of like the cloning scare was kind of starting to bubble up maybe, and this concept of, what is it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Dolly might have been around this time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so maybe it was riffing off of that to some degree, but I feel like anime has a lot of that too. But this whole section, to your point, like that whole all those monologues that Liquid has around that section is laying the groundwork for, like I said earlier, like one of the pillars of the narrative for the whole franchise, and that's just the relationship between Snake and Big Boss genetically. And how that all works, and Liquid's a part of that, but he's not the only, and yes, there's the sort of twin snakes kind of side of it, but eventually Liquid, isn't as important, but just that relationship and the sort of father-son dynamic and like just the weirdness of all of that, and Big Boss being the soldier of the, what do they call him? The soldier of the century or whatever, the greatest soldier who ever lived. Yeah.
Right.
Of the 20th century. Oh, so good. It's just so good.
Well, and with the 20th century being the bloodiest century, it's a particularly good time to be the best, I guess.
Good point. Yeah. And some of the songs, by the way, they don't hit here, but later in the series when they just do these original basically pop songs, or like very James Bond, stylistic songs that they will write and they have a vocalist do, and it's just literally like, a James Bond, song for the movie.
Snake Eater has an amazing introduction.
Oh my god, yeah, and they
probably my favorite.
They keep doing that throughout the series, and they're they talk about stuff like Big Boss's legendary figure and stuff, and I don't know. The man who's what is it? The man who saved the world. Is that for 5? Yeah, so good. But just this is, you're right. This is an important section because it lays so much groundwork that he mines later throughout, continues mining and mining and mining. But yeah, the fist fight is just so great. That he comes to that point where it's really down to just bare knuckles, and they're both shirtless. I think at this point, right? And
yeah,
it's just so great.
They duke it out, and I don't really know how well it's explained. I guess because of the Rex battle, somehow he lost his shirt, but then immediately afterwards, she's gonna take him out through the tunnel, and she's like, "But it's cold out there." He's like, "Oh, here's my suit." So it's like, what? Yeah, silly. But it's great. It highlights their twin nature as well, when they both are just laid down to be just the men they are and not all the technical mumbo jumbo that they have.
I mean, it's like two little brothers, scrapping. It's it's so funny, and kind of like adolescent in a way too. But I don't know. It's just such an interesting, weird thing.
It's like two monkeys fighting on the bed.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, one doesn't make it.
And if one of them falls off, he's in trouble.
Yeah, you just summed up the franchise. Two monkeys jumping on the bed, and
that's right. One falls off.
Yeah. So Meryl's alive for you.
Yeah.
And Hal for me.
So does Otacon show up to drive your Jeep?
Yeah, Otacon's driving, and he's being his irritating self in all of that section, and yelling at you. I'm sure the gameplay is all basically the same. I'm trying to think. They have a big.
I still hate the Jeep section. I'm just
it's terrible.
Not good.
It's just slow.
It's very difficult to aim.
Low turn rate. Very weak.
The turn rate's lousy. You can't really see where you're shooting. You're kind of guessing by tracer if you're going to hit him, and of course he's ducking the whole time, so you might overshoot him. And then there's guards.
Yeah.
Luckily, there was another ration tucked away. So there were actually two. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to do it. I don't think I could have done it on just one because I was just terrible at it.
I think I failed once and then kind of remembered the pattern and was able to do it. Yeah, but so
yeah, no, I did it the second time. So I didn't have to do it a bunch of times. But the first time I played it, and I played it, I believe, on normal difficulty. I played this section probably for 2 hours trying to get past just the Jeep fight. And
that's rough.
And I was super frustrated because I was like, "Oh man, you've got this escape. You've had the big battle. Like you've had two big battles, and it just felt like unnecessary cruft.
Yeah.
I mean, I like the chase, and that's a tried and true thing, and it makes sense. They got to get out of there in a hurry and all that stuff because they might be coming to drop bombs on the place or whatever. I like all of that's fine, but the difficulty of it was just that should have been a triumphant sort of thing instead of again and again and again. Because of course, the first time I played it, I was playing on normal difficulty. I also had trouble with the other battles. It took me forever to beat Liquid on top of Rex.
The balance, for the game does seem, like they didn't quite hit it for normal. I've always felt that. I feel like that's why I played on easy this time. But yeah, so when I don't remember because it's been so long, but what is the conversation like between Meryl and Snake at that all those sort of sections? I mean, before the Jeep and after, there's a lot of talking for Otacon and him.
Right. It's very. Yeah, it's very. It's especially after the Jeep gets out and he pulls her out from the wreckage. There's a lot of talking about it's basically wrapping up the love blooming on the battlefield sort of theme.
Yeah.
Because that's sort of what's been going on, and of course Campbell calls off the airstrike or whatever. He's managed to gain control from the Secretary of Defense or Assistant Secretary of Defense or something.
Which I had a note here that the ultimate villain ends up being a politician, which I think is heavy commentary throughout the series, but hilarious. This villain kind of out of nowhere comes in and it's the Secretary of Defense or something, and he's kind of
right, and he's basically in the codec. And then, Jim Hausman's been arrested. You're like, who? This guy I never heard of 10 minutes ago.
Oh man, the end of Metal Gear Rising. Oh man, that last battle is you're basically it's another kind of fist fight, but with the politician. And
really?
He's all beefed up, but it's like in a suit and a white t-shirt or white button up, and it's hilarious. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, no, I'll get there one of these days. But yeah, I mean, they have their sort of touching, like we made it out kind of time, and then it also seems a little bit like some of the James Bond movies at this point, where now he's going to go and have some time away. He's going to take his time getting back to civilization, basically, with her.
And does she go with him?
And yeah, she goes with him. They both get on the snowmobile, and they sort of take off. They don't. I mean, it's not like one of the James Bond movies. He basically ends up and they're in a submarine and they've got champagne and they're just kind of going wherever. It might be Spy Who Loved Me, but no. Here it's more. They're sort of riding off into the sunset, and they're talking about the importance of love
more
and things
friends,
like that.
So it sounds it's roughly similar. I mean, Otacon's such an awkward character, and they have these long dialogues about how they want to enjoy life now, and they talk about love on the battlefield some because he obviously talks about Sniper Wolf, and Snake is kind of sad about Meryl and how he handled all of that stuff and has regrets and all that. And I think Campbell comes on and talks about that, addresses that a little bit, right? Because she's dead. And so it's actually, interesting and semi-touching, but Otacon's just so funny because he just keeps talking about, I want to enjoy life and this is my time to, it's just so. And
well, there's there's some of that with Meryl as well, actually. That sort of sense of like, we made it out and we're alive. And it seems like Otacon's more like, well, I survived my bad decisions, and now I'm gonna.
It's just such a funny.
Try to have a real life.
The themes, I guess, are threaded throughout a little bit, but they hit it so hard at the end. You know what I mean? And I don't want to say it's misplaced, but it's interesting how fully they commit to this pretty philosophical theme right at the end. When you've been talking about gene science and all this crazy high-tech stuff and nukes and all this stuff, it's just
nukes and
cloning. Yeah. And it's just such an interesting juxtaposition maybe of that. And he just clearly, the way he writes, there's so much commentary that he just chooses to put in there just for his own self. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm going to say this now and yell it from the mountaintops. It's so obvious.
Right. This is him like at the end of The Last Samurai. Every cherry blossom.
Yeah, well, and you just can't help, and I think this is a hallmark of the series, you can't help that just feel that Kojima has all of these things he wants to say about game development and about the world, and he just puts it in there. He's just like, and it's slightly opaque, but really not, and you just kind of got to applaud him for it, whether you agree with him or care. Just the fact that he fully commits, which I definitely will get to takeaways and themes. The one quick silly joke that I need to mention, because I've never played this version. They finally introduced themselves fully, Otacon and Snake, and I think we may know that Otacon's name is Hal, I think at this point, right? Because they name him earlier. And he says, well, yeah, as you remember, my name is Hal. And Snake introduces himself as David. And I don't remember where that comes from other than David Hayter, who's but that ends up being the canonical, I guess, his first name. But then they make this 2001 joke where Otacon says, oh, Hal and Dave. And they both laugh at each other in this super awkward way. And then they ride off in the sunset. And
yeah, that definitely isn't in the Meryl ending. That's funny though.
But it's so on the nose, 2001 reference and cinemaphile kind of reference, like Hal and Dave. Ha, ha, ha. I just didn't see it coming at all, and I just was cracking up. So
we've both lost these women that we might have been in love with. Oh, but did you catch this reference? That's funny.
Yeah, it was hilarious.
Wow,
I could not believe that it just happened, so I had to mention that because I bet you a lot of people don't see this ending because they don't want to lose Meryl. So. I don't know what the percentage is.
Well, I mean, like I said, I didn't even know. And then I guess the last thing that happens is that we actually this is not comprehensible unless you go back and watch the briefing, which I did. But there's a shot of huskies pulling a sled.
Well, not only that, but it's like
and the Ocelot and I guess it's Solidus conversation is happening at that time. So you're hearing, or maybe that's right after it. It's a fairly brief sequence where you see the huskies.
But it's also, but how did you watch all the credits? Because it's also like scenes of just Alaska, like bears and mountains and forests. And,
right. But and I guess that's where he was living.
He's going into the wilderness.
That's in the right, and that's the briefing and all that stuff kind of tied that all together for me. He had the huskies because he was training for the Iditarod. Which again, it sounds like one of those things that he read in a book, wanted to fit in somehow.
Yeah, it's great. It's great.
And of course he's the alpha dog, I guess. But yeah, and then you get the Ocelot and
post credits,
Mr. President conversation.
For those who don't know, and you probably do, but always wait till the credits are over for a Metal Gear game, because every one of them has something like that. And this one was very, very short compared to the others, but yeah, it's a great little sequence where Ocelot. Turns out Ocelot actually has been working for. Yeah, I mean, I don't know, maybe kind of like not necessarily double crosses Liquid, but it kind of was a sleeper agent the whole time and working for the president.
Yeah, Mr. President. And this was all a test to determine, because the thing that I like about that is that's when you hear that Snake is actually the inferior one, that Liquid was the one who got all the superior genes. Yeah. And it was really just his bad attitude that made him the weaker one.
Yeah. It's what makes the hero, like if you're the underdog and you come back, it makes you more heroic, I guess, or something. But yeah, it's those little tidbits there where it's kind of, it's funny that we bring up Lucas so much. I think we've referenced Star Wars a couple times because there's this sort of like the mastermind complex, with both Lucas and with Kojima, and not to, again, to compare them from the prequels from a quality perspective, but the sense that did he have a plan all along or not, and the kind of that whole question for the Star Wars films back in the old days. And then here, you have this little president reference at the end and Ocelot, and you really often wonder, I always wondered like how much he really knew what was going to happen in the future, because every single game seems retconned in sometimes significant ways where he realized he'd boxed himself in, so he comes up with some crazy way to get himself out of it. But it's cool.
Yeah, I mean, at least I always wonder that about other things as well, like comic books. I think are a classic example of where you wonder and really any cliffhanger, because that of course is the basis of the Star Wars stuff, and especially Indiana Jones is the serial cliffhangers where you got a half hour or 20 minutes more of a show, once a week or whatever, back in the 30s and 40s and stuff. And so you put, because you want the people to come back the next week to see the next thing, you always end on the cliffhanger, right? Where the guy's hanging on the edge of the cliff, is the canonical example. And I think that part of the fun of writing those was to come up with a situation that was so dire and strange that it's like, how is the person gonna get out of that? And of course you also had to do that for your audience. I think that, so I always wonder that about like comic books, which often end in a way to make you enticed to buy the next issue. Right. But with video games and movies, it feels a little different that way. I mean, the scene to scene, obviously, but between movies, you kind of don't expect that. The biggest one really in the original trilogy is the end of Empire. But there really isn't anything that makes you want to go back from the original trilogy, and certainly I don't want to go back to the prequels. But you do wonder, but I don't know. I can't imagine, as action-focused as he is in that trilogy, the original trilogy, to go and then have this thing be about a trade.
No, that's where it kind of starts going off the rails. Where you're like, well, clearly he didn't have a plan, But I mean, in this one, and the other challenge I think games run into.
But this definitely is more like, this definitely feels more like I'm maybe just a mind at play with these sort of characters and ideas. Not necessarily that he knew where this was all going. I can't imagine he planned, I don't know, 20 years of games or whatever out in his head. But to take where he was and see, well, where can I go from there that's wacky and crazy? I think it is probably the sensible way.
Well, and just having enough, right? Like the president was this sort of shadow over a bit of the game the whole time anyway, right? Because they always there's a few times where they mention, is the president approve this, or does the president know, and all this kind of stuff, right? And so he's not obviously a secondary character even as much as that, but to have it come at full circle at the end and actually have him referenced and have Ocelot have a direct connection to him, it's enough of an intrigue where you're like, well, wait, what does that mean? And then of course 2 like is a whole nother podcast because of all the crazy stuff that ends up happening there and the choices he makes, and the sort of meta commentary, and then the president and everything too. So, and who the president is, and So, oof.
All right. Well, let's take a quick break because we're here at an hour, and come back with some takeaways and maybe get to a review or email or two.
Sounds good.
Welcome back from the break. It's time, as we normally do at the end of a series, to look at our takeaways for the series. I guess you've got a couple of them, so I'll let you do one first, and then I'll do mine in between. Because I know this is your baby. I don't want to steal any thunder.
Well, I have so many, really, but I boiled it down to basically 3, but 2, it's sort of 2.5 because 2 of them are really closely related, and the first 2 that I'll hit, and then I'll do my last one after you. But I kind of combine them to essentially commitment to narrative and commitment to cinematic. This is sort of a cinematic presentation in a game, and I kind of combined them obviously because they're closely related. But we talked about it a lot. Off and on throughout the series of just how cinematic, and I don't mean it in the game sense. I mean it literally in the film sense, right? We talked about the camera work and even the concept of everything being, all the cinematics being in engine versus in this era. It was more traditional to do CGI because people wanted to have really high fidelity cinematics, right? So he committed to, Yeah, exactly. Yeah, by these standards today,
you look at Final Fantasy VII cinematics, you're like, boy, I wish they had just done those in engine.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's the funny thing is, once you get past the low poly, software rendered look of the game, ironically, it kind of still holds up today. Versus, like you said, Final Fantasy doesn't hold up today. But that full commitment.
It is actually, by the way, I wanted to correct that. It is hardware accelerated transform and fill, I believe. So there are things actually, and so the texturing as well. But there were limitations. But there were things that it couldn't do for sure, like lighting and stuff like that. Was all came along later.
So what's the technique? So hardware, maybe that's not the right way to put it, but what is the technique that ended up coming out with like Voodoo chipsets and stuff? What's that called?
So that had a full hardware TNL pipeline. Yeah, bilinear filtering, and then clipping, perspective correct clipping or something like that.
It's where it's the smoothing of the textures.
That's bilinear filtering. That definitely wasn't here, and of course there wasn't enough resolution really to filter with anyway. But.
No, but the PlayStation 2 started doing it, right, and
that's correct.
GameCube and but anyway, and of course PC.
This was purely some hardware acceleration and not. And not much else. So, I mean, there was texture on it, but you couldn't do lighting in the hardware as far as I can recall. I mean, basically, you could pre-light your vertices and then send them down as lit vertices into the pipeline. So you basically just change the colors before you send them. Anyway, that had come up earlier, maybe in the first episode, and I wanted to. Glad you mentioned it again because I never corrected it.
Yeah, and just for me, the takeaway is just that in this day and age of gaming, like there were few games that were willing to, there's plenty of I definitely take the rebuttals to this of like it's still not up to film standards, if you will, or clumsy, or kind of just ham-fisted in the way that it does it. But all that being said, for what it was trying to do in a medium that wasn't very common for someone to be too successful with it, with the camera work and the commitment to storytelling, and regardless of how crazy and zany you think the story is and how long the cutscenes are, at least there's this commitment to it that he continues, and he obviously gets ahead of him. He gets way ahead of himself throughout the series, and he needed an editor, as many good directors do down the road.
This one is really a perfectly distilled,
it's the most
movie.
Yeah.
And it hits all the right notes in the way a B movie does. It's serious enough, the stakes are high, everything matters, and then the camera work is actually pretty good. Yeah. It's like everything you could possibly ask from a B movie, and certainly some of the best action movies of the 80s, which obviously were his influences, definitely reflect that.
So that was my main. That was my main one. That it's one of those games that influenced so many other games afterwards, because people saw that you could actually make that a goal in a medium that wasn't used to doing that. So what was your
my biggest one was basically my repeat from last time, which was Anachronox, which is letting your freak flag fly, because he is so wearing all of his things that he cares about on his sleeve, from his influences, obviously, that we just talked about, but also maybe the things that concern him. Of course, he's a Japanese man making a game, right? Of course, Japan remains the only country to ever have nuclear warheads detonated on its soil. In wartime, and I mean, not in sort of test, and you have to wonder how that impacts a culture and society.
Sure.
Yeah. And why it might make you fearful of technologies that are kind of out there on the edge, as well as the stuff that's been so damaging in the past. So there's all of that kind of wrapped in there, and then lots of those little touches that we mentioned with the FBI, and just the things that he sort of picks up and runs with. Even that final monologue with Liquid, where he's rips off his shirt and all that stuff. There's clearly more James Bond in there. I mean, you can almost hear him saying, "Come, Mr. Bond, you enjoy killing as much as I do." And he just pulls in all of these things that he clearly loves, as well as all of the things that concern him and worry him, and sort of the aftermath of the Cold War. And of course, they're closer to Russia there and everything. I mean, and China. So all of these concerns, all the things that he loves and all the things that he fears, are all wrapped into this game. You feel like you know this guy playing this game, like in terms of, like, you could sit down and just write a list of the things that he has contemplated and read and seen, and have a pretty good sense of what made Hideo Kojima at this point in his life. And that kind of individual feel for a game is, I mean, it's something I always admire when I encounter it. It's one of the ways I think you can be really generous as an artist of any kind, and certainly as a game developer, is to put so much of yourself into your work, because you are sort of vulnerable and naked doing that. And he's been lucky in that the reception has generally been pretty good. But you don't know that going out there. And I don't know. I admire that, as crazy as it is.
Yeah. I think I agree. That's one of the things I like about the series too. This that singular vision and it being so consistent throughout the series, and just gets, if you love it and you get into it and you really embrace it, like, it only gets, he doesn't let you down throughout the series. Right. In my opinion, it just gets crazier, and so if you're into it, it's you're rewarded.
Yeah, no, I mean, of the ones I've played, I have enjoyed all of them, 1, 2, and 3, and the amount of 4 that I've played. I like all of it, and the gameplay is while rooted in its past, it still manages to find new and interesting things to do as well. So it's a series that I'm glad there's as much of it as there is, to be honest. So.
So my last one won't be a surprise too, and it's really kind of another commitment one, and it's really just going whole hog and committing to stealth gameplay. Though there are other games that influenced my love of the genre, like Thief, and things we'll play in the future that really like, well, what would it be like to make a Thief game where it isn't about a power fantasy, it's about stealth and it's about being vulnerable. And this was a similar game. You definitely have some power fantasy moments in this game, but committing to the stealth aspect of this game and being vulnerable, and being weak, and dying quickly.
The lethality.
Yeah. There go the dogs. We'll see how that goes.
That's fine.
No
worries.
So it's one of my favorite genres, and this was one of the games early on that committed to it for me. So.
Yeah. I mean, this year, as I had said before, this was the year I was playing Thief for sure. Because Thief kind of goes all in on its concept for the whole thing. Well, that's not entirely true. There are the sections in the sewers or whatever where you have the zombies, but yeah, it's way more that and less bosses and things like that. So that was the game I was playing this year. But yeah, I mean, I'm a huge stealth fan myself, so I totally echo that. I've watched where the stealth genre has gone over the years, and I'm now working with a guy who made one of my favorites, so it's all pretty good. But yeah, let's I don't want to give short shrift to the takeaways, but I do want to get on to the email and reviews and what we're doing next time. So
I mean, I could keep
do you
going.
have anything else you want to mention? I know you could keep going.
Well,
we could do a whole nother segment where I just go off to another room and you just talk for an hour about the things you love.
Well, I mean, as a sort of honorable,
I mean, the voice acting is a thing we talked about for sure. That's amazing.
That's a good honorable mention. I think another honorable mention for me is just the sort of fictional context for the game is something that I've always really loved. The sort of spy espionage genre of it,
the mix.
Yeah. And then the other thing that really gets expanded upon throughout the series, maybe just gets started in this game, but his commitment to experiment with mechanics over the series too, and kind of do some interesting wacky things with things and one-off things, like for instance later in 3 where you kind of have this camouflage thing coming. Basically every game has something that he's experimenting with but decides to ship. Right. I've always appreciated that as well. That he's willing to do that, right? Because a lot of franchises will just rest on their laurels with what their bread and butter is, and kind of just stick to that for as long as possible. And he doesn't do that. And in this game, you see the foundation of that, right? Because he fools around. We talked about it some, but he fools around with sort of one-off things, right? With those little touches of like, how do you like using cigarettes to see laser trip lasers, and stuff, and just all these little, just kind of cool, to really leverage the fantasy fulfillment of the character in the game. It's like you give him all the gadgets, like you nailed with the James Bond kind of comparison. So
right. Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's a really important thing, actually, is that the games and series that are unable to do it or unwilling to do that find their audiences dwindling, I think. And I don't have sales information in front of me or anything like that for the Metal Gear series, but it clearly was doing well enough to keep doing them. And for one thing, and for another, that that evolving of it makes you, as a fan, keep wondering where it's going to go next and make you want to come back, and in a cliffhanger way that's more about the mechanics than it is the story. So that's good too. I mean, I think that you look at how much people are anticipating Death Stranding, or Stranding.
Yeah. Stranding.
That I mean, people are really looking forward to that, and it's because of these sorts of things that we've been talking about, the commitment, the craziness of his ideas, and the way that he likes to evolve his thinking about different genres. I mean, I really lament that we'll never get his and Del Toro's Silent Hills game.
Yeah,
so,
totally. Yeah,
I mean, that's just what a loss to not have that. Although we do still have, although you've not played it, we do still have the trailer.
Yeah, and since I have a new appreciation for Silent Hill now because we played 2. Yeah. So now I'm bummed. I didn't care too much when they canceled that, but now I do.
Yeah. Sometime you'll have to come out. I'll have to get my PS4 to where you are, and you can play PT. And get you an adult diaper. So
can't wait. That sounds like a date.
Right. Yeah, woo! Exciting times for these middle-aged men. Okay, well let's call it good there, because I think we did talk about the big points all through the series for sure, and we are on our 4th episode as well, when we plan to do 3. But let's turn to reviews and email. I have a review. It's short, so I thought I'd go ahead and go first. This is from Lyra Atwater. Through the Apple Podcasts reviews. This is an interesting topic, friendly hosts. These are people you'd like to hang out with, friendly and interesting. I've only played perhaps half the games they cover, but I listen to all of the shows because their commentary is great. I learn things about games each time, and plenty of their discussion is about issues I would never have known existed in games. Pretty cool. So thank you very much, Lyra. If that is your real name. I don't know about friendly, but we'd like to at least try to be interesting.
I don't know if you want to hang out with us either, but appreciate it.
But very much appreciated, and thanks for putting that up. Let's turn to, we're just going to do 2 emails we have, so if we don't get to yours this time, we have it. I have them at devgameclub@gmail.com. But you have the first one next week, because we'll be doing the first episode in the series. We'll have, I think, a little more time to cover a few emails. But you go, sir.
Okay, I'm going to do the first one?
Yep.
Okay, subject, president of Arms Tech, my brother and my dad, plus twin snakes, from Michael Baker. Wow, that's quite a subject. Hi, Brett and Tim. First time, long time. I love listening to your stories from being in the industry and your insights on all aspects of game design, including learning fancy terms like inverse kinematics. So thank you for taking the time to do the podcast. During the first episode of Metal Gear Solid, you weren't able to remember the name of the president of Arms Tech, and I thought it was funny because I'll never forget his name. Both my brother and my dad are named Kenneth Baker, my brother being Kenneth Baker III. Growing up, we always got a kick out of Campbell saying that the line at the beginning of the game about the president of Arms Tech, Kenneth Baker. I wanted to ask you both if you ever played the GameCube remake of Metal Gear Solid: The Twin Snakes, and what your thoughts were of that game were. As I got older and became more interested in game design, I always appreciated something you both talked about in the previous episodes, how the original MGS, the stealth mechanics, are reinforced by the fact that the combat mechanics are not very good. Snake is supposed to sneak, so direct engagement with the enemy was designed to be disadvantageous. It's difficult to aim your weapon, and usually using the weapon will typically result in altering other soldiers, making an even more difficult situation for the player. Twin Snake seems to lose this aspect of the original design completely with the addition of first-person aiming and the tranquilizer darts from MGS2. Areas in the original that required you to learn enemy routes to sneak could be breezed through in Twin Snakes by tranking everyone in the room as you run through it. I'd love to know your thoughts on the remake, and thanks again for the podcast. Mike Baker. Wow. Brother of Arms Tech president. That's cool.
Brother of Arms Tech. Heir to the Arms Tech Industries. I actually haven't ever played that, although I can sort of understand why they might have incorporated those elements. Basically, because there was an MGS2 and it was on that was coming out on a competing system, and why not try to incorporate the latest, greatest bits of the technology or the design. But yes, it would definitely change this game quite a bit to have that ability, especially the tranking, which I think part of the charm is the fact that you can't knock people out permanently. You either have to kill them, which alerts everybody, or you can do CQC and basically knock them out for a short time, and then they're alert after that. So, yeah, I don't know that it would fit with the game super well, but I can understand the impetus to do it.
Actually, I actually haven't played Twin Snakes, somewhat intentionally for sort of reasons like this. And after we had finished playing this for the podcast, I thought to myself, I probably should play it eventually someday, because I just need to, I need to have played everything. I mean, I've played even the Acid games.
You need to have it.
Yeah. But now that Mike has mentioned this particular problem, I'm not sure I want to play it now, because it kind of, as I was reading this, it kind of reminded me of I think we had a mail about, ironically, Silent Hill 2, where someone was talking about the remake and about how they changed the fog distances and blew things out, which sounded like a good idea at the time because it was a remaster or something. And it sounds similar to this one, where it's like, well, this other game that was built around these sorts of mechanics had a cool thing, so why not put it in this one? But I totally agree with him that, and I'm not surprised to hear that it really changed the game in a fundamental way that kind of deflated it, because all of these mechanics and systems and level design are all built in kind of a networked matrix way, and once you start toppling those and disconnecting them, you really can mess up the sort of beauty of the game. It's a balance.
Right. And you lose the moments of, I figured out how to get past that, when you have a tool that basically lets you get past everything, right? I mean, having the trank gun means that the guards are no longer really threats, because you can take them out one at a time and all that stuff. And I'm thinking back to like trying to get by the one guard and having to figure out, I can use the box, but I have to put it in the right place. And that basically teaching me about the box mechanics, and just like all of that stuff would have been lost had I had the easy ability to just, let me just take him down. This is getting tough. Let me just take him down, Instead, and I would have lost that interplay of this guy's path and the camera and the timing, and I mean, just all of that stuff together would not have been easy to replicate if I could have just kind of got through it with the addition of this new tool. So, yeah, you have to be really careful when you add stuff to a game. Definitely can change.
Yeah, I need to do a little more research on that game, but for those who don't know, I want to delve into how, like, you may have heard this, Brett, but it was an interesting development, I understand, because Silicon Knights actually were the ones that ported it, but they worked with, I believe, Kojima and Miyamoto on it, because I remember, what's his name? Who's the Silicon Knights guy? The infamous leader of that band. Anyway.
I've forgotten.
Is it
Denis Dyack?
Denis Dyack, yeah, sorry. He just always famously kind of brags about working with the two of them on this. But it sounds like it was quite a weird development, because they were trying to kind of like get this game out they needed a Metal Gear on GameCube, and it felt a little ham-fisted when described, like put Miyamoto and Kojima and Denis Dyack into a room, and I don't know how that can work. So I want to, it kind of reminds me of
very different approaches to design.
Yeah, it just seems like a clashing of titans of some weird way. And then this sort of like court jester is thrown in. That's right. Sorry, too much commentary on Dennis, but I'm
hoping he doesn't listen. I'm betting he doesn't listen.
Yeah, betting too. We'll play. We'll play Eternal Darkness eventually.
Yeah, for sure.
To give him props for.
Yep. Yeah. No. Definitely great game. All right, we'll take one more because it's also short. This is from Ben Zog, our buddy Ben from Iowa Zog, if that is your real middle name. Subject is Metal Gear Solid ending rewards. Says, I have a couple notes. First, I'm surprised Tim never chose to submit to torture. If you'd submit and do the Otacon ending, you get his stealth camo for New Game Plus.
Oh,
Getting
I
the
didn't know
Meryl
that.
ending gets you a bandana that, when equipped, gives you infinite ammo.
Oh, yeah, right.
Second, if Tim never did Otacon, I'm going to guess he never did New Game Plus. 2 pluses intentional. On your third playthrough of the same game file, same save file, Snake will be wearing a tuxedo after taking off his scuba gear instead of his typical sneaking suit. It's a fun little James Bond tribute. Hope the carpal tunnel is under control. Looking forward to the conclusion episode. Ben from Iowa Zog. Thanks, Ben. The carpal tunnel is getting there. Between the new keyboard and liberal applications of ibuprofen.
Yeah, no, oh, go ahead.
Just for the swelling. That's you take ibuprofen to deal not with the pain, but with the actual underlying problem. Anyway, go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah. No, I do. I did read. I had read about the tuxedo, but I never had committed to 3 playthroughs. But I didn't. I somehow missed the probably because I just ignored anytime they were saying, well, if you let Meryl die and do the Otacon, and then I stopped reading. So yeah. I never actually investigated what you get. But that's, now that I've done it, now I'm intrigued. Maybe this is time to get to 3 playthroughs and do the tuxedo. It's probably a good suggestion, and I another excuse to play this game again.
There you go. Like you need them.
Yeah. Thank you, Ben.
Yeah, no, that's good to know. So thanks also to Christian and Travis and Michael for writing in. We'll get to you guys next week. I wanted you to know we did not forget about you. I did not. This is bullshit. I did not.
No, I heard that coming a mile away.
Okay. Well, let's turn to the next game. I'm going to let you talk about it and tell us where we're going to play to.
Yeah, we decided to hit back to the PC, and something. Yeah, Brett has suggested, and we were swimming around sort of the old Looking Glass style games, and we've played a little bit of that with System Shock 2 and such, and we'll eventually get to some of the classic ones, but one of the ones that for both of us I think really rings true for that kind of sort of first-person emergent gameplay RPG-ish games is Ultima Underworld. And I have really, really personally fond memories of this game before getting into the industry. And it really is one of the progenitors of this the Looking Glass crew. And of course, it was Origin at the time when this one was published, but a lot of those folks went on, Warren Spector, Doug Church, and etc. And it really influenced a whole mess of games after this, including System Shock 2 and System Shock and such. So, Ultima Underworld. Holy cow! I remember it being a beast, but I'm excited.
The Stygian Abyss. I can't remember how it's pronounced.
Stygian, yeah.
Stygian,
yeah.
I'm really looking forward to it. It's a game that I've never finished. Because this came out while I was in college, and so it was something that I kind of looked at, I guess, near the beginning of my LucasArts career, but I didn't play all the way through. I was a huge Ultima fan, but by this time I think I played Ultima VII would have come out around the same time, and that was the one that I played. And I didn't have room in my life, or really even a computer capable of playing these. I had to play them on borrowed time. So I am looking forward to really delving into this. It is available on GOG, Good Old Games. It's super cheap to get 1 and 2 right now. I think it's like 70 or 75% off. So it's really easy to get. And it is a DOS game, but usually those are wrapped pretty well by by GOG, and there's no issues with it. And you can actually play them on even Macs and stuff. So well worth taking a look at. These are really they're really figuring out how to do some of this stuff that we take for granted in the sort of immersive sim genre today. I mean, the most recent being a game that vied for my number one last year in Prey. So it's I mean, it's kind of where a lot of this stuff started. In terms of being fully immersive in real time and everything.
I'll talk plenty about it when we start playing. But
we'll
lots to say about that, and I would even say potentially influences on the Elder Scrolls stuff too, with Arena, the first game and stuff. So I remember that. I don't remember the years, how when each one came out exactly, but I feel like big deal. We're gonna play just through level 1 is our thought, just as an introduction, and we'll have plenty more to do. It's probably going to be a 4-episoder, I would think, but
oh yeah, definitely. This is a pretty big and long game, and is my recollection, and it's also a difficulty thing. I think
it's hard.
I'm not sure it has difficulty levels. Yeah. So this one may be tricky. So it should be fun to watch. I will be streaming this. I have a new keyboard that'll also add to the fun, in terms of that might be tough to do, because of the way the keyboard's laid out. It might be hard to move around on that keyboard. I don't remember how it controls. I feel like the mouse is used, but I don't even remember.
It is, but it's sort of the cumbersome. It's before we figured out
click on the sides type thing. Yeah,
it's before we figured out sort of WASD and stuff, and mouse look, I believe. Right. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So it's definitely a little bit before that stuff. It should be loads of fun. And it is a super deep game, and there's a lot of systems, and it should be really crunchy for us to bite into. So looking forward to that. For sure.
Me too.
In the meantime, I want to thank everybody for writing in to devgameclub@gmail.com. You can find me on Twitter at Brett_Duville, and him at
Tim Longo Jr. with a JR at the end.
And of course, you can find the podcast on Twitter at DevGameClub. That's where I announce my playtime for when I'm going to stream it. So if you want to come hang out, we usually have a handful of folks hanging out and chatting and just talking about whatever comes up. So it's good fun. And it usually is hours of it. So plenty of time to drop in anytime you want. But I guess that'll do for us this week. For now, I'll say aloha.
Aloha.